Good morning, welcome to Full Scottish. We are here every Sunday at midday for discussion on Scottish politics, Scottish culture, throwing in some music as well today. Our guests this morning include Mhairi Hunter and Professor Murray Pittock. Well, thank you for joining us. You can watch live at broadcastscotland.scot. Hope you enjoy the show. Good morning, I'm Richard Walker.
And I'm Suzanne McLaughlin. Welcome to Full Scottish, an hour of political and cultural discussion, which we broadcast every Sunday at midday. You can watch it either live or whenever you please at broadcastscotland.scot. Our guests today are Mhairi Hunter, SNP Councillor at Glasgow City Council, and Professor Murray Pittock of Glasgow University.
And there will be music from Megan D. Sorry, didn't mean to talk over the top of me there.
Typical
music
man.
from Megan D, whose current CD Out in the Ocean is available at record stores and on Spotify for streaming. We'll kick off by discussing our own stories of the week. Suzanne, since I so rudely interrupted you, I think we'll kick off with you. What was your story of the week?
Well, it's stretching a little. It's a story of the fortnight, I suppose, but I hope you'll indulge me because it was so important. It was the unanimous passing of the Domestic Abuse Scotland Bill in Parliament, which was helped in no end by Scottish Women's Aid and Assist and all the women's organisations, and of course the bravery of all the women that came forward with their stories and this landmark new legislation that redefines what domestic abuse means. It's hugely important, and we owe a great deal to Scottish Parliament and doing this, putting it through, and of course to Dr. Marcia Scott, who has campaigned for this her whole career. It's absolutely wonderful. So
Got cross-party support?
Yeah, absolutely, as it should. And it's going to really change how domestic abuse is viewed. I think it's fantastic.
Mhairi?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think that is really a landmark moment. I think it's kind of connected.
Mm-hmm.
The story which struck me in the front page of the Sunday Herald,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of focus of the story is whether we ban mobile phones from schools. And what's underlying it is sexual harassment by
Absolutely.
boys of girls and sexual harassment by boys of female teachers as well. So that's the kind of angle of the story, and it's there are different kind of points of view on that. But for me, the bigger issue is what are we going to do about this?
Well,
When boys at school and according to this from quite a young age are learning these really sexually aggressive attitudes, we really need to think much, much harder about what we do about this.
absolutely. I mean, to me, Mhairi, you're quite right. It's a whole bigger picture, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I read somewhere recently that the very, very first sexual encounter any young boy will have now will probably be hardcore porn
Yeah.
on their phone.
Yeah.
It's not quite a look at a underwear section in a Freeman's catalogue,
Mm-hmm.
It's really quite horrible. And if that's what they're viewing, and they're so young, so immature, some at 12, 13,
Yeah.
14, how they then treat young girls of the same age, and the expectation is that they will have growing up as young men and women coming into their sexual sort of grown up selves, and how they treat people if this is what they're faced with. It's horrific. It's quite
I
frightening.
think there are two kind of potential approaches to this, and one is about trying to control, and I think this is where most of the focus has been on trying to control children's access to porn, children's access to these kind of damaging attitudes and pictures and films and so on. But for me, as well as that, and I think possibly more important, it is about education.
Mm-hmm,
It is about, from the earliest stage possible, educating boys and girls, because it's not just boys. Girls
absolutely.
buy into these kind of attitudes as well. Educating them from the earliest possible age about equality, about respect, about not buying into these kind of things.
We need to identify the scale of the problem here and be sure that we don't underreact or overreact to it. I think one of the issues, and this is a connected issue, it seems to me, is there's rather a struggle over social media, and of course the social media giants right now, a political struggle because of their size and power, and there's a real risk of going down the censorship route. I mean, anecdotally, I think quite a lot of young people actually have got a better grasp, I'm not saying of this kind of issue, but of media issues and what constitutes truth and falsehood better than some of their seniors have, to be quite honest. And so I think you need to actually listen to young people, in particular in this case, women and girls' experience about how they feel this is affecting them at school, and to identify what the size of the problem is, because it's very easy to react, but we need to make policy that will last in this space. And there's a very strongly reactive culture, it seems to me, around some of these issues before we identify what we're dealing with and how we should deal with it, because in a sense we need to move away from a situation where there are just really sharp actions and reactions, where censorship or is the instant response, because we're not getting results. If this is a real issue, we're not getting results in changing attitudes, so we need to work on that.
I agree. When I seen that headline, Mhairi, my first thought was no. I mean, for a start, how are you going to police it? You know, for a start, you know, like it's you know, and to me it would seem a wee bit like, you know, a sort of a law for the sake of a law, really. It's almost impossible. You know, kids will find a way to have their mobile phones in schools, and you know, unless you get around strip searching them all, you know, it's impossible to police. But also like that, I also thought the censorship, surely the route is what you're saying is the correct education, that they don't do these types of behaviours. They don't think it's appropriate to share.
If they don't do it at school on the phone, they'll do it elsewhere.
So it's about educating them in school, and I've got teenage daughters, and through conversations with them as well, I know that it's not just the mobile phone in school, it's a whole culture of kids are frightened to be kids. Like my daughter's a first year undergraduate, and they're frightened to have what you would call a normal sort of undergraduate or teenage life. The girls are scared to, you know, get a little bit drunk and fall asleep, because you know, they don't know that pictures going to be taken, or things going onto the net.
That I grew up at a time when there wasn't social media. I so much on me.
I wonder will ever be politician, but you know, will there be any politician, because there'll be all these horrific.
For the days when the camera was a camera.
The phone was at home.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, you're a councillor, Mary. Is there cause for, you know, having a wee look in Glasgow City Council of updating the sex education that's in schools and making it a bit more about consent and social media than just the kind of the basic? I
was quite heartened by some of the comments from the teachers in the article saying, no, it's, you know, we should be looking at this as actually a way to educate young people. The other side to that is that, you know, I mean, employers do have a duty of care to their employees. They have a duty of care to the girls going to school. So if you are getting boys going about taking pictures up girls' skirts and stuff like that, if that's what's going on, schools do kind of have to take some action on that. I just feel, you know, we need to think before we just say ban mobile phones. I don't, you know, because you're not actually dealing with a behaviour like that. You're just kind of saying we're going to ban your phones. It's not going to stop what causes that kind of behaviour in the first place. Yeah,
and possibly there did as well. It's a bit, you know, of a an overreaction in that it's everyone's punished for the actions of some. So yes, absolutely. You know, schools, I agree with you, duty of care, and if kids are caught, then absolutely their phones should be confiscated, their parents told. But for the rest, it seems to be like a wide process of education and informed consent.
I mean, it's about understanding. I mean, kids these days have so much information surrounding them, you know. And this crosses over into all kinds of things. It's not just about, you know, the kind of sexual side of things. It's kind of about everything. Kids have so much information, and we need to be teaching them how to actually make judgments about what constitutes real information, what constitutes, you know, fake news, what constitutes rubbish. But you don't think
they're quite good at knowing? I think. See, I'm much more positive. I think they're. You know, I think that they're better. They're better at knowing this. You know, they actually are really. They got their heads really well screwed on, I think. I mean, fake news. If you look at the electoral, if you're looking, say, at the demographic distribution of the Trump voter, or the demographic distribution of hard right or extremist voters in the UK, you're looking at
Middle
predominantly elderly or older people who still rely heavily on print newspapers, which is one of the reasons that certain print newspapers have grown up to cater and to feed that kind of market. I honestly think that, you know, certain newspapers have got more credibility with their 60-year-old readers than they would ever have, or any equal story would ever have with the average 15-year-old. So I'm with the 15-year-old.
Controversial. Anyway, moving swiftly on. Murray, your story of the week.
My story of the week. Well, I'm going to be. I never want to be controversial. I just want to point out some of the facts and consequences. So, my story of the week is a Brexit story, I'm afraid, but it is the Northern Ireland border story, and it's the story which takes us to within a very few days from Theresa May to stave off an incipient rebellion, talking about no membership of the single market, of course, and of the customs union, and also no membership of any simulacra of the customs union. And nothing that looks like a customs union, smells like, you know, if it's you know, got a tail at 4 legs, it's a dog, and nothing like that. Yeah. And Barnier is stating very interestingly, as the chief EU negotiator, just at the end of the week, that it's important to tell the truth, and that will absolutely undermine the regulatory alignment with Northern Ireland, which was part of the December agreement, which is very clear from what she said, but whether she actually knew that that's what it implied is another matter. So we have here a complete contradiction in a very dangerous context, where there's still effectively a de facto direct rule in Northern Ireland, and there is no constitutional solution to the immediate restoration of the executive. And at the same time, the British government has once again got itself in a terrible tangle by directly contradicting what they agreed to in December, and what Varadkar, as the Taoiseach, pressed the other EU 27 to back, and went round all the capitals asking them to do so. So this is potentially, yet again, a political crisis centred on Northern Ireland.
And then whatever happens in Ireland will have repercussions for here, because clearly if there is a separate deal for Ireland, Nicola Sturgeon will say, well,
rightly,
we need the same deal. Why is it good for Ireland and not good for Scotland?
That's what I'm sure what the First Minister will say, and I'm sure that she won't get an answer. But that's what she will say. I'm sure of that.
What, you mean there will be no clarity in Brexit?
I think that's entirely possible, but I don't want to stick my neck out too far.
You don't want me. No, you don't want to. Okay, my story of the week, very briefly, is I suppose the developments in the voting for the deputy leader of the SNP. We had James Dornan MSP on the show last week, and just after he appeared, he decided that he had made his mind up. I'm sure nothing to do with what we discussed on the show, but he had made his mind up to run for deputy leader. I think he's still the only person to have declared, although Tommy Shepherd, according to the press this morning, is the favourite. He ran the last time. Pete Wishart is saying that he's considering it, so I don't know whether that's that he's wanting to be persuaded or dissuaded, but we'll wait and see what happens there. But I think it's an important post, because I think the deputy leadership role is one of those roles which has not really been defined and can be defined anew. And Mary, you'll know a bit more about this than me. I'm not in the SNP, but this is it's a big job, and I think one of the arguments against giving it to someone who has already got a big job, so somebody who holds a cabinet post, for instance, is that you can only deal with so much. One person can only deal with so much.
Yeah. I mean, the kind of role of the deputy leader in the SNP has always had a bit of a focus on policy and on campaigning, and on the kind of internal structures within the party in terms of policy development and training and all that kind of stuff. Working with other office bearers on the NEC. So that was a lot of the focus of the previous deputy leader contest. I mean, I would like, first of all, actually, just to take the kind of opportunity to say that, I'm actually gutted that Angus Robertson isn't our deputy leader anymore, because he was great, and he's somebody who the whole party trusted, the whole party liked, and he did a fantastic job.
He's missed on the front bench, that's for
yes,
sure.
I know.
No disrespect to
he's
Ian,
obviously he's hugely missed in Westminster, but from a party point of view, he was absolutely 100% solid to do anything for the party, and the party would do anything for him. So I mean, it's really, really sad that he's had to move on. and look for, I mean, obviously he has to find a job now, he has to find something to do, that's completely understandable.
And they're completely incompatible to go out into a work market, and thank goodness, I mean, it's a shame for Angus, but thank goodness with the kind of party, any other party would have marched into the Lords, absolutely, but we don't do that, and it's to our credit and to his credit, because, it's every other party takes the easy way out, but Angus has got to make a living.
We can come back into kind of, frontline politics at some point, but in terms of the role itself, it is about providing a bit of heft. It's about helping the leader. It's about working with the NEC on those kinds of issues. And I think that's where the kind of debate will lie around. And I think that's how party members will choose.
During the last deputy leadership campaigns, we had interviews with all the candidates. So hopefully we'll be able to do the same this time.
Well, there are quite a number of candidates, though.
Potentially. There were 4 last time, and that logistically that was a bit challenging. So
you might get more than 4.
Well,
I mean,
there could be more than 4.
Well, the two kind of obvious contenders to me is Derek, obviously, and John. Neither of whom want it, as far as I can. See.
I think if John Swinney stood as deputy leader, everybody else could just go home. He would get 90% of the vote.
It would be.
John's got a job to do.
A huge job to do.
From the point of view of the SNP, there's a real case for it being somebody at Westminster, because the connectivity, I think, between Westminster and Holyrood is not all it could be at all times. And it is constitutionally at present a very important gig to be in Westminster, that actually would be a clear sign of the importance of both places currently.
There's also a bit of chat in the party, though. I don't know if you noticed, one of the nicest women in the SNP, Julie Hepburn, and she was chatting about it. She used to be the National Political Education Officer, and a well-respected woman in every way. And she wasn't stating an opinion as such, but she was saying, there's been some chat and some conversation about should it just be a non-parliamentarian at all, an ordinary, grassroots, run-of-the-mill, concerned member who wants to roll their sleeves up and let that do the heavy lifting, because we already have Derek Mackay as business convener, who is very capable and very able to do that end.
And has a huge amount on his shoulders already.
Has a huge amount on his shoulders, but does that. And of course we have a National Secretary and we have the NEC. So, maybe it's a case of someone just being a listening ear, So it's an interesting...
It's absolutely open to any member.
Exactly, so it's an interesting
and we'll see how
concept.
It unfolds over the next few weeks. We move on now to discuss, I suppose, one of the big issues in the papers today, and facing the new regime at Glasgow Council and Tesco and you name it, it's facing everybody, which is the issue of equal pay. Unison had a march yesterday demanding that the equal pay legislation be put into force. That's a huge problem for Glasgow Council. Or is it, man?
It is and it isn't. I mean, first of all, I would say the piece by Danny Garavelli paper was really good. I mean,
really good.
And Sunday
she's such a good journalist. She really. I mean, you would like to say to every journalist, just have a look at her. She actually finds out what she's talking about before she writes about it.
She is, and she gets right underneath the issues, and she always brings a human touch into her stories.
Absolutely, I mean, I think from the point of view of a Glasgow City Councillor, we were elected on manifesto pledge to resolve this in our first term of office. Possibly people thought from that we were saying we can resolve it in a couple of weeks.
I mean, it's a big job.
We've taken the most important first step by persuading, and we are a minority administration, so we have to persuade all of the rest of the parties in the council just to drop legal action and just say we're not going back to court.
Because the court session instructed the council
there's been all kinds of complexities around. I mean, the council could keep going back to court and just kicking this can down the street,
which is
what's happened for 10 years. But we said no, we'll drop legal actions, start negotiations, and that's happening. And there are meetings diaried every fortnight for the next year, because it's going to take that kind of length of time to get this resolved, because it's hugely complex. It's not simply about the compensation and working that out. It's about our existing kind of pay schemes, which we need to kind of approach those both at the same time, really. So it's going to be a hugely complex series of negotiations, but we have started it. The kind of processes and train. It's taken a bit longer than we would have hoped, because when we were first elected, we found out an amazing thing. There had been literally no discussions between the council administration and any of the staff representatives or any trade unions about this for the entire period that equal pay claims have been made.
It's as if they didn't think there was any possibility of them losing, and they just, no plans whatsoever.
I think rightly they looked at other equal pay cases and thought, this could be a real financial headache for the council, which, it can be, it is.
Well, it is.
But the longer you leave it, the bigger that financial headache gets. So
Murray, it's a
there was
headache.
no sense at all in the approach that they took. So it's a good thing that we've managed to reverse that. But it is going to be a bit of time before we can, you hear figures being put out, this is about, we don't know how much it's going to be. We at this stage, we do not know. We're going to work our way towards that figure, and we're going to work our way towards how we can ensure that, our pay and grading scheme is fair, and how we can ensure that, we need to kind of acknowledge the absolute vital importance of what these women do, which has not,
but
has
there's
not
a lot
acknowledged.
a lot of vitally important work the council has to carry out. So it's a balancing act, which is a headache that many people look at and think, thank goodness, I don't have to deal with that.
I think it is a difficult one. Righting historic wrongs when they've dragged on so long is always going to be difficult. But I think it's exactly the right approach to take time over it, because it's a very simple equation, equal pay for equal work. But of course, there's a difference between equal pay gap and a gender pay gap, and the nature of those who undertake work in certain pay and certain grades and certain sectors, and knowing how to deal with that. So that requires a lot of careful handling, which I'm not surprised to hear that the city government are undertaking, but it will undoubtedly have a major impact, and I think that major impact will, of course, need careful explaining to those who may lose.
Well, there's winners and losers in any negotiation. Yeah. And I was reading this morning as well. Tesco's looking at facing a landmark bill of $4 billion, aren't they? For gender recompense. So and they're just and they're not alone. That's the highest amount. And these wrongs, as an ardent feminist, these wrongs have to be righted. But we also do with looking at this. Nobody can snap their fingers and pull this amount of money out of a hat and reject. And it's not, as you say, it's not about just righting the wrongs. It's about getting it right for the future. Yeah. And putting robust structures in place.
Indeed, and we've had equal pay legislation. The Act was introduced in 1970. You would have to wonder why pay is not equal.
Well, do you know what? Most of the big payouts on equal pay have happened in the public sector, and that's because it's a unionised workforce and because women can get themselves organised. Tesco is really interesting because that's a massive claim in the private sector, and if you go into the private sector, I suspect those issues around equal pay are even bigger than they have been in the public sector. So I think it's something every employer should probably just be doing an audit, just make sure that, you can defend your pay schemes. Because
in most workplaces, though, pay is not transparent.
No.
Nobody knows really what the person next to
them. They might know this. They might know the scale. Yes. They don't necessarily know whether. But that's again more public sector or more public facing sector. Yeah. They don't necessarily know whether they're on the scale. But of course, there are, from the point of view of workplaces, very good reasons for that, as well as very bad ones. And one of the reasons that we haven't actually got as far as we might have done in this issue is that both those good and bad reasons are rather hard to extricate without actually creating all sorts of problems when you solve problems. And that's one of the reasons that this is such a difficult, what should be such a simple, is such a difficult issue to resolve.
On the face of it, 1970, the Act comes in, on the face of it, companies, private, public, should just say, right, okay, everybody gets paid the same.
What's equal work?
equal value to the company. It's equal.
In the context of this particular issue, the reason Glasgow's facing this is because it did not adopt the kind of national model. After the first wave of big equal pay cases, the kind of Holyrood administration at that time came up with a kind of model of a pay and grading scheme which has not been challenged by anybody. Glasgow did not adopt that. It adopted a bespoke system which saved it a bit of money. Mm-hmm. And now, given that it saved a bit of money, that money was being taken away from somebody. So, you can work out
what you sold,
where those steps led to. It led to where we are now.
I was trying to read it.
I mean, the point is there are ways to avoid it. If people choose not to avoid it, then you have to. Yeah, you have to end up dealing with the situation. It is a
really complex process. I'm not suggesting that that there was anything wrong in equal work legislation, but as soon as the equation equal work equal value are introduced, then there are all sorts of ways of obfuscating and avoiding.
Well, that's it. People can follow the letter of law without following the spirit of the law. There's all sorts of ways to go around it, and they did. And the patriarchy reigned supreme. I mean, I'm feeling very smug here because my tenet, Murray and I were talking about it earlier, is that only hire a man if you can't find a woman who's good, for the job. So we avoid that. Just sort of leave men out the equation altogether.
And gender segregation is.
I think that might actually reach the equality legislation. Yes.
I mean, gender segregation is a big part of this, where you have any kind of, field of employment which is done mainly by women, you'll find they will be paid less.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not coincidental that they wait and being.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
And I've actually been reading some stuff. I was reading some stuff last week, which was really interesting. It was mainly from America about how when women start to enter a particular employment field, the pay starts to go down.
Well, this is as well. But also, interestingly, I read a huge article on wine. I was talking about different types of wine, and rosé wine is very undervalued. It's a very complex wine to make, rosé wine, and it's by people who know a little bit of wine. They tend to ignore rosé and sort of look down the nose at it a little bit, and it's because a lot of women enjoy rosé wine. So even the food and drink that women enjoy becomes undervalued.
We're overthrowing the patriarchy. Just get used to it.
And surely that leads us nicely on to so that leads us nicely on to talk about obviously Vote 100 and let's smash it, you and me together. We'll just elbow this out. 100
years of some women.
Yes, exactly. Rich women over 30, but nevertheless, hugely important. Hugely important.
One of the things that was extremely important about it, interestingly enough, and I'm just going to go back to Ireland being my favourite topic of the day, is that actually the female suffrage made a critical difference to the Irish general election in 1918, which led to the huge Sinn Féin majority with 73 Sinn Féiners returned, because of the role that women had in the Sinn Féin movement in the 19-teens and in the Edwardian period, and because of the opposition of the Irish Party under Redmond to female suffrage. So actually, if you can do the stats, you can see that actually right away, not in UK general elections, but right away, this was a UK general election still though, but in Ireland in 1918, suffrage made a really significant difference to political radicalisation, and that was an outcome really like the mass enfranchisement of men in the 1880s. So actually, these things can make a really big difference. It's interesting to chart not just where you enfranchise women, as central as it is, but where actually enfranchising them changes the political discourse, the nature of politics. That was not the only example worldwide.
What do you think anniversaries like this, or marking anniversaries like this, what purpose does it serve?
It kind of, I mean, for me, it kind of reminds us that actually, 100 years is not that long, I mean, in historical terms, it's not that long. So, folk who think, we've got, women have the vote, there is equal pay legislation, there is equality legislation, therefore we have equality between men and women. It's like, well, Do you think we've really gone from that in 100 years? No, we haven't. We've still got quite a lot of work to do on it.
A long way to go still. I mean, I was looking as well quite recently going back to the 70s, to the sort of the 7 tenets of women's liberation, if you want to go back to, to that moment. And, we've not even realised all of them, so there is a long way to go. Women are not free from sexual harassment and violence, and abortion is not free, safe and legal, even in the UK, so, and I speak to people every day that are still under the impression that abortion is legal. And it's not, and that's a whole other can of worms, but the 7 tenets of women's liberation, we might have, we have the vote and we have equality on the face of it, but tying all these stories up shows that very much there is a very long way to go.
There was one thing that really struck me about it was the way that Theresa May somehow used a speech about the suffragettes to kind of start saying we need to clamp down on political protest, which was kind of like, away you go. I mean, I think this kind of talk is really dangerous. I mean, there is an issue with people and women, being harassed in politics, being harassed online, and I know this, I get this on Twitter. But that's a completely different thing to talking about, political protest. Completely different.
What do you think of? There was a bit of a chat, and I know Ruth Davison was speaking about, but this, I feel quite angry at the thought of the suffragettes being pardoned. I don't want them pardoned.
No,
it was a rebellious political act. These women broke the law, and they knew what they were doing, and they were, they were right to do so. And ugly laws have to be challenged.
Yes,
absolutely. Absolutely, I don't want this whitewashed and some sort of pardoning.
You're never going to learn the lessons of history if you pretend you can keep on revising it. And I mean, a lot of the issue about suffragette behaviour was because the suffragists weren't listened to. And so one of the important lessons it teaches is that actually if there's a real disruption on a major political issue, you have to engage with it. Otherwise, there are risks you're running by not doing. That's the lesson. Not to hand out pardon. Not to hand out
100 years later,
because
meaningless.
Because first of all, pardon suggests you still regard it as a crime. But it was regarded as a crime at the time, and you have to live with that, because that's the only way you'll understand how the world we live now came into being. You can't just revise the past to suit yourself, because otherwise you're going to keep on repeating it.
Well, that's it. You're doomed to repeat
it.
Exactly. Absolutely.
We're going to have some music now, I think. Are we ready for the music? Yes, we are. Megan D, who's going to sing a song from her current CD. Megan, can you tell us a wee bit about this song?
This is the single from the EP, Out in the Ocean, and it's about kind of going out into the world and trying to be independent and do things on your own, sort of thing.
Off you go.
Cheers.
Independence is always a good thing.
I don't want to be that version of me anymore, 'cause there are places I want to be and things that I want to see that I haven't seen before, and now I'm free to be what you never let me be. So I'm trying to swim out in the ocean, just me, myself, and the breeze. I'm trying to swim out to swim out in the ocean, 'cause I believe everything you told me to believe. Oh, I believe. Oh, I believe. Oh, I don't know if you can hear me, but I see things so clearly now that I have got no place to be. It's funny, I have never felt so free. Oh, I'm trying to swim out in the ocean, just me, myself, and the breeze. I'm trying to swim out in the ocean, 'cause I believe everything you told me to believe.
Thanks, Megan. Will be more from Megan just at the end of the show. Quite like to move the discussion on now to Police Scotland, who do not have their troubles to seek currently. A couple of days ago, they lost their second chief constable. Now they're looking for their third, and it's only been going for a couple of years. Murray, is that an indication that the whole concept of a single police force in Scotland is a flawed one, do you think?
Oh, I don't think so at all, I have to say. I mean, I think that the concept that that a single police force maximises the efficient use of resources, the efficient circulation of information, and the best use of those most experienced and skilled officers, that is all absolutely, unequivocally, the right approach. If you consider the situation that there were 43, 47, I can't quite remember it exactly, police forces in England and Wales, some of them really tiny, all with their separate cultures, because all big workplaces have got their own cultures, all to some extent unwilling to share information with each other, all preoccupied to some extent, as organisations always are, with whose turf it is and whose responsibility it is. Obviously, a national force really is a good idea. The issue is that it's never simple to actually amalgamate so many different organisations in a short period of time. I think there were mistakes. I think the IT systems, integration of the IT systems was a mistake. In other words, it didn't happen properly, and actually it's quite important, to not to run with multiple databases describing the same set of data. But I also think that whoever took over would have a very big job on her or his hands. And that's turned out to be the case. Whether they were the right people for the job, I wouldn't like to say, but it's difficult to get the right fit for this kind of job because it's a new kind of job, and there are certain things, both the reconciling of hugely different organisations, which are complex, and also what I don't think was anticipated, that the minute there was any bad news story, as in the bodies in the car and the M9 and so on, it's a national story. If something goes wrong in Norwich, then hey, it's a Norfolk Advertiser story. But it goes wrong in Scotland, it's a national news story because of Police Scotland. And I'm not sure that the comms, the PR management really anticipated that. That's just one aspect of the problems that are integrating the force. But it's a prize worth seeking, and it's really the right idea.
It's also become a political football, I guess, to use the cliche.
I mean, there's, from a kind of elected member point of view, the creation of Police Scotland has not led to kind of centralisation. If anything, in terms of how you interact with the police and how police interact with communities, there's actually far more of a focus on community policing. Police are actually far more accessible than they were before. Now, I'm not saying that's because of Police Scotland. I think it was because of the first Chief Constable was extremely keen on that kind of model, but it's continued to be the case. Police are actually very good partners with the rest of the public sector. which they haven't always been, but they are now. You know, now they will sit round the table with other community planning partners, and they're absolutely part of that kind of local democratic framework. So I think when people talk about a lack of accountability or somehow Police Scotland becoming one organisation, that resulted in them somehow becoming less a part of the community. My experience is the opposite. I actually think that, you know, they are very much more focused on community than they were in the old Strathclyde police days. That may be about changes of personnel or policy, I don't know, but that's just my experience.
You've got to say the data is very positive. The data on reducing levels of crime, particularly serious crime in many areas, except where there are issues about increased reporting leading to increased levels. But all the data points to the efficiency in the round of policing in Scotland. And really, we should be a bit more interested in the data and a bit less interested in the individual news stories about who's in, who's out, who's up, who's down.
Yeah, I think also going from what you're saying as well is that I agree police are more. I mean, I can't be the only one who enjoys like some of the police stories on Twitter, and Skye and Lochaber police in particular. They're fabulous, and you know, with feeling more accessible, it's a social media thing, part of that as well, but the police do feel quite accessible, and there's, you know, I follow quite a few of the, you know, the chiefs of the areas and the constables of the area, and they're able to get things out really quickly, and you know, even in my own area in the West End, a wee boy went missing the other week, and the sort of senior constable in that area tweeted it, and it quickly went into community kind of groups, and he was found within really quickly, and it was him saying to people, "Oh, give us a hand here," and he's known, and he chats about the area, and I see more community stuff coming through, and like you. It's absolutely a big prize, and Police Scotland, I think it's, as you say, it's much maligned through a lack of understanding, I think, in some by, you know, and obviously it's a stick to beat the SNP government with, let's face it, isn't it? You know, it's oh here's a bad story, you know, and
but there is a problem. So how would you articulate what that problem is? Is it a personal problem? Or just the people that were in charge were?
The problem's the nature, the scale, and the size of the job. It's a unique first mover thing to amalgamate into a national force. It's all right saying it's the same scale as the Met, but the Met is much more cohesive and coherent within a territory, and doesn't involve so many disparate cultures as Police Scotland does. Actually, getting what is the person who fits the job spec, who can really lead this effectively, and what kind of job will they have been doing before? And will they come for this kind of job with this kind of level of political scrutiny? There are a lot of difficulties around finding the right person for the job, and I think that is the core issue. That actually identifying who has managed so many cultures into one, who has managed so much political flack, and who is able to see what the risks as well as the opportunities are, and guarding. I mean, some people have seen the opportunities, talking about community policing, but probably haven't seen the extent to which there are real risks, and that they'll be in the front line straight away if anything goes wrong. You know, it doesn't matter if it's in Caithness. So it's actually really difficult to find the person who's done the right job before to prepare them for this.
Well, that's it. I mean, you can imagine the job description, you know, PR man or woman who's also a police constable, who's also an expert in multicultures, who, you know, and who is a politician as well, and good on the media. Like, please apply below. It's putting all those.
There may well. I mean, clearly there are issues at the top. I think. I'm not sure if this makes sense in a kind of organisational way, but I think what I'm saying is that there may be issues at the top. I don't actually think there are issues in terms of delivery, you know? So how that equates with the role of the person at the top, I'm not sure, you know? But I think that's what's going on.
Is there an issue in terms of governance, in terms of Scottish Police Authority?
There
has
could be,
not covered itself in glory in
be.
this, I think, and it's got a new chairman now. There was a discussion
They've
at
got
Holyrood about how
Susan Deakin.
Susan Deakin.
Yeah, I think Susan Deakin will get them sorted out.
Whip them into shape.
Yeah.
Quite often, yes, you don't actually have the right people on these governing bodies, and it's not the only one in which I'm not going to suggestion. It's not the only one, and this is true.
Our lawyers are still in their bed.
You know, people do need the right sorts of experience to actually act as effective boards as well as effective executives. and I think we always need to keep that. We need to keep that in mind, because in a small country, different relationships, issues, and priorities can sometimes come into play, which aren't best for the service as a whole.
There was a move at Holyrood to make the next chairman of the Scottish Police Authority to be appointed by Parliament rather than by government. Do you think that's a good thing?
I have no idea.
You're not an expert in police authority.
I'm not an expert. I mean, certainly that's something they could look at, but you know, I couldn't sit here to say if that would make a difference or not. I honestly don't know.
Okay. Last thing we should discuss, on a lighter note probably, is I guess what we expect from our politicians in terms of their engagement with celebrity. We've seen Kezia Dugdale going into I'm a Celebrity, getting me out of here. Ruth Davidson's now going on the Bake Off. Haven't they got other things to deal with? Right?
I think, you know, people involved in politics want people to understand that they're human, and they are human, you know. And I think that sometimes being involved in some of these kind of celebrity stuff is a way of engaging with people who don't engage in politics. So I think there are good reasons for them to go outside a kind of strict remit of being a politician. The issue with Ruth Davidson is that she was nowhere to be found when we were talking about the Brexit papers, and then she's kind of tweeting a radio station and phoning in to somebody to talk about baking. So it's kind of, yeah, you should do these things, you know, it's absolutely fine for you to kind of say, I am actually a human being, I have hobbies, I can have fun, I'm not a robot. But you kind of need to do your job first.
Yeah, and for someone who barks on about the day job, like ad nauseum, to then go and do something like this, and Kezia as well. I have to say I had a little bit of a grimace because I gave much the same argument a long time ago back then. I was talking to someone back in the early days of Big Brother, and when Gorgeous George was going on to Big Brother before he became...
You supplied the milk, did you?
Well, I thought, I have to say, I thought it was a good thing when he first initially signed up, because at that point Big Brother was
with both
huge.
George Galloway and Tommy Sheridan going on Big Brother. You saw what they were made of, you know.
Do you care what politicians?
Well, it doesn't excite or it interests me. But one of the things I do think is, you know, we need to be able to understand that when people do a job, that if they're prominent in that job, that's because of the job they do. And I'm very uncomfortable. I think we should all be uncomfortable in principle, people using that prominence to actually make themselves prominent in another sphere. Because actually, if the cult of celebrity is one of the things that undermines the value of expertise. Which is one of the reasons we're talking about the Police Scotland, we end up with personality stores when we should be looking at data and systems. So actually I am uncomfortable about it, and it also allows in the current situation a whole story to be made out of certain sorts of values which themselves part of an image bake-off, which while actually distracting attention from other stories. It nearly always you'll find when politicians do it, is to distract attention from something else which reflects on what they might have been doing in the role they're actually being paid to occupy. So in that sense, I think we should be really suspicious of it, because it is going part of the way down the road to populism.
Well, I totally guess I was to say I was a big defender of at that point, because I thought at that point I sort of despaired all those years ago, because when I was young, when I was a student at college way back 2 years ago, students were very radical and very interested in politics and very, you know, progressive and and it felt that for a while there that sort of got lost, and they were only interested in the cult of celebrity and you know, talking about the Kardashians or whoever was, you know, the favourite at the time. And I felt at that point, George going, well, maybe what this will do is he'll open it up and people will start talking about politics.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, that didn't happen, and I think it's very dangerous because we could get into a situation where, you know, as you say, rather than experts and people who are very knowledgeable in their field becoming the politicians and who our kids listen to, it starts becoming a great big X Factor sort of popularity show. You know,
I think we might be talking about slightly different things. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with a kind of politician going on Children in Need or something like that. You know, I'm kind of joining in with that.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the likes of going on Big Brother, or if you're talking about Kezia going off, it's like, no.
You've got a job to do. Do your job.
And also the idea that you actually can go on something like that and say, I'm going to talk about Labour values in between eating bugs. No,
it's exactly. But it was at the time I was sort of cautiously optimistic, thinking that what it might do is spark conversations, and that didn't happen. But yeah, I agree with you very much, Murray. I think it could become a real popularity contest, which is dangerous and a dumbing down.
What's its legacy been for Kezia? What's the legacy of it? What's it done for her? What's it done for the Labour
Well, it made her a
Party?
few quid, didn't it? You know?
Well, she gave away. Did she give it away? Oh, she didn't say. One of the arguments put forward in favour of these things is that it does broaden the political discourse and get people potentially involved in politics. But I can't think of any example of anybody going in any of these shows where there was actually a proper political discussion which made any
like,
difference.
You know, somebody going on Children in Need or somebody doing something like that. It's the equivalent of the MP or the MSP going to the local kind of fair and handing out the prizes or whatever. That's
engagement.
about their involvement in wider things that are happening. It's kind of
and letting the mask slip a wee bit.
It's
and
kind of like
that's
I
good,
am part of this thing which is happening, and I think it's important for politicians to do that. It's a different thing to kind of say, I'm going to go on Bake Off, or I'm going to go
and be famous
because if you want people to know you're human, then what human can take 3 weeks leave off work like that to go on a show?
No.
Well, I don't think she was meant to.
No. Well, anyone else would be sacked.
She was told not to.
Yeah.
She went anyway. Right. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you very much. And before we depart, we're going to have some more music from Megan D. So I'm not quite sure what she's going to be singing. And Megan, can you tell us?
Yes, I'm going to be playing I Can't Wait, which is the second single from the EP, and it's a story about an old guy and he loses his wife towards the end of his life, and he's just thinking about what he's going to do.
Great.
So go.
Take it away, as they say.
On the closing night, when the lights go down over history, well, I'll close my eyes and pretend that I'm not there. just don't know where I would be. And when you left, you said that I would learn. But a life without your face is an unwanted reality. 'Cause I don't know where to turn but to the dark. 'Cause I'm not hopeless for this new start. Oh, and I feel so blessed. It's time to part with my loneliness. And I can't wait to be there with you. And I can't wait. Didn't know what to do, but now I've seen the light. And oh, it feels so right. And I can't wait. So I will meet you at heaven's gate. Ooh, and I can't wait. 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 No, I can't wait. And I can't wait to be there with you. And I can't wait. Didn't know what to do, but now I've seen the light. And oh, it feels so right. And I can't wait. So I will meet you at heaven's gate.
Thank you very much, Megan. That was absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So sadly, I think we're coming to the end of our show, and would like to thank very much Murray and Mhairi for joining us on this Sunday morning. Thanks to Richard for joining me in the
And
panel.
to you for watching. We'll be back same time next
Same
week.
place next week.
Same time-ish next week.
Thank you so much, and please do log on to www.broadcastingscotland.scot at Broadcast Scot. Follow us on Twitter and retweet, watch it, tell your friends. Hope to see you next week.
Bye.